relationship with you, so we are not cashing that check, even though the person who wrote the check, his account is sitting right there at that bank. And persons are made to feel disenfranchised, really, that because years ago, Mr. President, you can go to the bank of the payer and cash the check. But I do know, and it has nothing really to do with COVID, because the banks have started this aggressive action long before COVID, where they have started, this is the commercial banks, Mr. President, where they have started disenfranchising small people. A lot of people don't have a bank account. And if you don't have a bank account, sir, how can you go and have this check cash? But I believe that most of the commercial banks that we have now are international commercial banks with branches here in Barbados. And I do know that they are following the guidelines of their parent banks, whether it's in Canada or wherever. But I do feel that the central bank can play a role of moral suasion and see if when a small man comes to the commercial bank, sir, with a check, that once the person presents their 2 forms or their 10 forms of IDs that the banks are asking for, I see absolutely no reason, sir, why those checks cannot be cashed. And I think it's a little bit unfair to those people. So I do hope that the central bankers are listening, and with all the new regulations that are coming on stream, please remember that there are people out there that need their help in terms of their day-to-day banking. I know that we are moving to a cashless society. And again, in order to move to a cashless society, you still have to have a bank account, sir. Because if I want to pay a person $100 for their services, they still have to have an account in order for me to go online and transfer those funds to that individual. And I do believe that that's one of the reasons, sir, that they had a few issues or are still having a few issues with national insurance, because a lot of old people don't really have accounts. So, and they feel a little bit threatened. I think that what the commercial banks and the central bank should do together is undertake what I call public education, because people are suspicious with online transactions. I ain't putting my money there because somebody can thief it online and I can't track it. And if, just as people are going to do with the COVID vaccinations, to undertake a public education program, I think the commercial banks, the National Insurance Board, and the central bank, who's the biggest regulator in this country, sir, should play a pivotal role in doing that for the country. On the other hand, my senator over here, Senator Holder, she spoke to the issue of credit unions. What I want to say is that a few years ago, when the then National Bank was sold, people are saying that Barbadians need to have an indigenous bank of some sort. Because again, these same people who, when it was the Barbados Savings Bank, sir, you would remember when it used to be a little building, a little office there in the same Parliament buildings years ago. And people used to go there and cash their checks. Even though, yes, we are moving with the times, we have to move with the times and bring our population along with us. People were saying as well, and I hear these things on the call-in programs, that I'm going to move my money from Bank A or Bank B and put it in the credit unions because I don't like how the banks treat me. But then I heard a discussion with the bankers on the air too, and one banker says, so what? When you move your money from Bank A and put it in the credit unions, guess who the credit unions bank with? They bank with us. So in other words, they're saying to you, you ain't doing nothing. So whether you put it there directly or indirectly, we are still in control. And that's effectively what the banks are saying. And I find that their tones are too aggressive, sir, too aggressive to the population here in Barbados, to the small people who want to go there and do their transactions. Everybody is not computer savvy. I do know that the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology, they have unleashed a set of digital ambassadors to the national insurance. They've done there, and they're doing an outstanding job. And that is an excellent thing that they are doing for the people of Barbados in order to educate the entire population of how to do banking, paying bills, and other services online. And I applaud the minister and her ministry for doing this outstanding work for the country of Barbados. And I don't know if they've done it yet, but maybe in terms of actual banking transactions, maybe I think you have partnered with BART, because I think I've seen an article where Miss have partnered with BART to help the Association of Retired Persons get on board, as it were, to do their banking online. So I know in the future when things get a little better in Barbados and we are thinking, I don't think that we have to reinvent the wheel, Mr. President. The credit unions are there and they have outstanding leadership as well. And I believe that it can be, the credit unions together can be morphed into an indigenous bank for Barbados, because they already have the cohort of persons, and they can as well pull in the post offices, the general post office, in terms of doing banking transactions. Yes, I heard some time ago somebody had made a comment about letting the postman cash checks for pensioners, but that's not a great idea, sir, not in this day and age. But what I would say, in addition to that, postmen are outstanding civil servants. They give some of the best service in this country. I want to say that, sir. Another thing that you can also do, the commercial banks, as I said, things have changed since COVID. So essentially, they are trying to keep people out of the banks. But I was going to suggest that even if you didn't have the account, say, for an example, that you wanted to pay a large person here that you might have taken goods or services on credit, you could actually go in the bank, and I know you would have experienced this in your last jurisdiction, sir. You go into the commercial bank and you can pay whosoever you want to. You go to the ATM inside, you know, the computers inside, and you can conduct your business on your own, and you don't need to have the teller, because in a couple of years, tellers might very well be obsolete. And I think that this is something that we have the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology, that they would have to prepare the country for. As I said, I know the digital ambassadors out there doing that job, and I think this is one of the other things that they can do in relation to educating the population in relation to the banking services. So, Mr. President, I just wanted to make those few observations where when we are changing regulations and improving banking services, whether it be at the central bank, whether it be at the commercial banks, that we have to bring along the population with us and educate everyone so that we are all on board together. And with those few words, Mr. President, I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Wiggins. Senator Adams.
Thank you, Mr. President. When I read this bill for the first time, I think the objectives, they really jumped off the page for me. 3 words that I listed there: independence, accountability, and compliance. Now, the acting leader of government business, she spoke to each of those. That was important because when you first see those words on that opening page, they really, to be frank, are fairly shapeless. You don't really know what it adds up to. But as you start going through the substantive nature of the bill and you understand the measures that are being implemented and that back each of those concepts, aspirations almost, I think on our side we've been far too modest so far in what this bill represents. This is an unprecedented transfer of decision making when it comes to macroeconomic policy and influence around that policy from the government to the Central Bank of Barbados. It's a neat separation of policy making, particularly fiscal policy making and general policy making, which is the job of government, and the execution of macroeconomic policy, which is the job of the central bank, experts who have been trained to craft and to understand the implications of what they're doing. We have never seen something like this before. And it is, I think, disappointing that that was overlooked in the presentations we've heard from the opposition. I didn't recognize the bill that was described by Senator Drakes as the one that I had read, because some of the very faults that she finds are corrected in this bill and are faults that led us to the brink of disaster in the 5 years leading up to 2018. I'd point out from the start that this is clearly a bill that's been modeled on some of the strongest independent central banks structures in the world, particularly the Reserve Bank of New Zealand and the Bank of Canada. That's quite clear. It's got its origins, as the acting leader of government business pointed out, in the period 2008 to 2013, when the IMF and the then government embarked on a series of financial sector assessment programs to really explore certain themes, and amongst those themes was the idea of greater or stronger internal corporate governance for the central bank. And again, the acting leader of government business highlighted some of the underlying methods that are being used to deliver this. I don't think she spoke about the staggered term limits for directors who sit on the central bank board. That is new, that's an innovation. One reason that is notable is that until now, and this is standard best practice through most parts of the corporate world, if you have a raft of directors arrive at the same date and leave at the same date, well, you have a huge loss of institutional knowledge and expertise in that organization. That is an innovation that strengthens the way the central bank is run. And it does another thing. Bar extraordinary circumstances, it nearly guarantees is a strong word, but it reduces the possibility that at any one time you could have an entire board at the central bank appointed by the same government. So you've got a diversity of representation there. And this is all about depoliticizing the work of the central bank. And that's one element, and the acting leader of government business went through quite a few others. The same financial sector assessment programs, they also spoke about how could you improve the institutional autonomy of the Central Bank of Barbados. Now, again, this bill speaks to that in some detail. We spoke about, Senator Grinder spoke about protecting the tenure of the governor of the central bank, for example. And he spoke in particular about job security and the relationship between that and being able to execute your functions correctly. Clearly, if you can grant the governor greater security of tenure, he's going to do a better job than if he's looking over his shoulder wondering if he's going to get the sack at any given moment. And again, those same programs that the IMF undertook with the government back in this period, 2008 to 2013, also looked very carefully at how you could mitigate the political tendency to want the central bank financing government expenditure, particularly current expenditure. In some ways, they had some foresight in looking at that. Now, I think this is an example where I don't grasp the point that Senator Drakes made. There now is a process in place to limit the amount of financing the Central Bank of Barbados could do on behalf of the government. It's depoliticizing the process again. There are clear limits set up. Now, one of the points, I don't want to misrepresent this, but one of the points made, And words like crafty and honesty were bandied about in a way that I find disheartening in a way and disappointing. But this idea that the government has given itself a way out by allowing extraordinary items to be excluded from the way this calculation is done, and somehow that's a dealing from the bottom of the deck. Did anybody say that when we renegotiated the debt structuring to include a natural disaster clause? That's an extraordinary item. That gives you breathing space that everybody can understand, during which you can recover from a potential disaster on your country. It's no greater or lesser than that. And again, I point to some of the model legislation and model regulations that are used at other central banks, like the Bank of Canada and the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. And I think the final point that came out of that period, 2008 to 13, that the IMF looked at was how to sharpen the focus of the central bank. You know, you don't want to dilute your efforts by giving your central bank too many things to do. And I'll speak to that in a moment. And again, this bill really took that to heart and did sharpen and narrow the focus of the central bank in a very specific way that reflected our immediate past experience. Now, Senator McConney did speak about how long it's taken this bill to come to Parliament. I think she said 9 years, the best part of a decade. And you sort of do have to wonder, having gone through this exercise 2008 to 2013, seeing all the benefits that your central bank could enjoy if you brought a bill of this nature to Parliament, how is it you didn't do it? Why wasn't it brought earlier? Why are we now being compelled to bring it? I think many people understand and know the answer ahead of time, but I'll put it this way. Leading up to 2013, the previous administration had already begun to print money, to expand the central bank's balance sheet through what are called open market operations, open market purchases of government securities. But it had done so, and I speak now as someone who spent some of his professional life in working for a global printing company. They did so in a way that was much, metaphorically speaking, like a flatbed printer, reliable, sedate, no great pace to it. But then, if they made a capital investment, metaphorically speaking again, they changed that printer to what might be more accurately called a large-scale, high-speed, flexographic, rotary version that really showed it was capable of debasing the currency at a ferocious pace. Now, even if it is the IMF and they come and they say to you, you know, you probably should take a close look at these assessments that have come out of the financial sector assessment program and think about implementing them. When you take a look at those, you know you're just going to get in your own way, of course. If you are determined to debase the currency in order to support current expenditure, no recommendation is going to stop you. So it has fallen to this administration to bring this set of measures in this bill before the House. And if I describe this as, in my view, revolutionary for the separation of the central bank expertise from government, I don't think I'm overstating. I think I'm doing it a service, in fact. Now, sir, there are a couple of other comments that were made I think are worth just picking up on. Senator Drake made an interesting comment about non-borrowed reserves and the necessity to split that out so you can analyze it better. I'm not going to pretend I know the merits of that, but again, I would point to the objectives set out at the top of this bill on the first page about compliance. This is about compliance to international reporting standards. Now, if those standards suggest that this kind of data should be split out, well, of course, the central bank would follow best practice. You can count on that. And there was another comment I think I just spent a moment on, and it was Senator Drake was referring to a potential disagreement over the direction of macroeconomic policy and the process behind that, which, if I understood her correctly, was almost described as a get-out clause, a means by which you could still, in the words of a former governor of the central bank, make the central bank a creature of the Ministry of Finance. Now, you could look at it that way, but the process is set out very, very clearly. And what it adds up to is a cost, a political cost for the minister to do such a thing. He's got to follow that process and bring it to Parliament and face a good deal of scrutiny on it. There can be no little backrooms agreement that brings that to fruition. And I think the broader point here, when you're talking about independence of an institution like the central bank, in theory, that is very, very good. But how far do you go? After all, you have a government that is elected by the people. There has to be recourse. It cuts both ways. The example that was given was just some lack of good faith on the part of the government in approaching the central bank. But it can be the case the central bank might be wrong. There has to be a process in place to manage that. And I don't think anybody would want to see a situation which Senator Greenwich alluded to, where the central bank governor is speaking publicly against the Minister of Finance. I don't think that is something that is desirable. It's not without precedent. When Senator Drakes was speaking, I was thinking of, it's going back a bit, I was a small boy, but I read about this. The general election in the UK in 1970, when the then central bank governor, I think his name was O'Brien, came out ahead of the election and spoke strongly against the policies of the Wilson government. That's not the kind of independence that's going to serve us well. And this kind of process and procedure is necessary as a check, both directions, a check and a balance on what we're trying to achieve here. Now, all these measures that were set out by Senator McConney, in my view, add up to an institutional strengthening of the central bank. You're buttressing the very functions we all know already that it should be doing, that we want it to do, but we want it to be free of the most nefarious types of political interference. We want it to be as free as possible from that. Having said that, within this bill, there is another category of measure that on the face of it is not obvious. I'm referring to section 44, which was touched on very briefly. It's only 20 words long, and what it does is it allows the central bank to open bank accounts for non-bank financial institutions. Now, I believe if you speak to someone at the central bank, they would describe this as a fail-safe. In the past, notably in the financial crisis in the United States, it was the case that the central bank there, the Federal Reserve, was unable to intervene to shore up, to support one of the non-bank financial institutions that they considered systemically important. This was Goldman Sachs. If that had collapsed, it was like the first of many dominoes. So that section 44 is a nod to that eventuality, a fail-safe should it ever be the case that that support is required. But it does something else. It opens up the possibility that the central bank, I'm going to rephrase this slightly differently. You know, I read through the debate for the original Central Bank Act in 1972, and one of the very striking things amid all the cut and thrust of that debate was that although you would expect disagreement on many things, there was universal or uniform disquiet on one matter in particular. And it's a conundrum that echoes down the ages, I think, for us. It was thought that at that time, the four banks that dominated the local economy, 3 Canadian banks and Barclays, an English bank, that when the chips were down, when it really mattered, that those banks would not act in the best interest of the country. They'd be every man for themselves. And a lot of time was spent discussing why this was so and how it might be remedied. And ultimately, when you consider all the things that were said, it boils down to a single conundrum, and that is, how do you incite or provoke greater competition amongst the banks, and perhaps more appropriately, more accurately, in the banking services sector? How do you do that? Now, that's something we live with today also. Also during that debate, the then Prime Minister, Aaron Barrow, he was lamenting that state of affairs, and he made the comment that the only banks that showed any staying power that lasted the course was the brewery, Banks and Beer. Amusing, And in retrospect, ironic in a way. I don't know how many people know about Banks Brewery, but that was founded about 10 years before that debate took place. It was founded by a Guyanese businessman. It was not founded with a commercial bank loan. That brewery was built on the back of 3,000 mostly ordinary Barbadian shareholders who subscribed capital to build it. And that bank is now in its, I think, 59th or 60th year. Sold in 2015, $21 million US, I think, to Ambev after a bidding war. The point of this is that is the kind of business that you would like to see as part of your sustainable growth strategy. Now, I use those words carefully because one of the key changes that this bill makes compared to the previous bill is that it narrows the focus of the central bank. The old act had 5 objectives, and they were quite disparate and relatively subjective in terms of how could you measure how well the bank had actually done against them. Now today we really only have 2, and one that is primordial: protect the value of the currency and ensure that there's order, stability in the economy, whilst at the same time enabling sustainable growth. You would like to see more companies like banks, for example, come through. And when you read that debate, when you hear that story, one of the questions that may come to mind is, for every success like banks that didn't have a commercial banking loan behind it, how many failures were there? How many people couldn't have access to finance? Now let me fast forward again. Bear that story in mind. Section 44, once more. The power of this by the central bank to grant bank accounts and also access to the financial plumbing in our economy. There's no suggestion the central bank should be competing with other commercial banks. But when you have an oligopolistic situation with 4 or 5 banks who are the gatekeepers in terms of granting bank accounts, that's not necessarily a good thing. There may be non-legitimate reasons that they do not grant a bank account. Someone may come a specialist in small and mid-sized business lending, for example, who clearly would be a threat to the banks. They might not be inclined to grant a bank account. What that section does, in my view, that's interesting and opens up a new, potentially a new way for the regulator to behave, is that it makes the Central Bank of Barbados the ultimate arbiter of who gets a bank account. And they can take that view and grant or not grant by comparing it against that secondary objective. How do we promote sustainable economic growth in this country? If it so happened there was a potential Banks Brewery, which doesn't fit my argument perfectly because it's not a financial institution, but it couldn't get access to finance, you potentially now have the central bank acting as the final arbiter. The government can't force a commercial bank to grant a bank account, and until this bill passes, as I hope it does today, the central bank could not. So this is a small way of opening up access to finance, a small and unusual way, because I know that it was not drafted with that in mind, but it's there, it's potentially on the books, and it's more than a fail-safe. It's something that can be used in an imaginative way to drive that, enable that sustainable economic growth. Now, I think there's another point here, is that it has been the case in the past that some specialist non-bank financial firms have not been granted access to bank accounts in order to begin operations in this country. Now, it has been said a couple of times on previous occasions in here that growth really comes from 3 things. I'm simplifying it in broad terms, but one is capital formation. Can you attract people and their capital to come in your country and deploy it in the search for a profit? The second way is, can you expand jobs? Now, obviously, there's overlap between those 2 things. And the third is productivity. Can you drive improvements in productivity? Can you do more with less? That's really what productivity adds up to. Now, there is an opportunity, I believe, in the banking landscape and financial services for the central bank to play a role in driving some of that growth in an imaginative way. You may know, sir, that the Inter-American Development Bank estimates that while our GDP is about $9 billion or so dollars annually, the informal economy is about a third of that, $3 billion. And also, you may know, the same IADB believe that 80% of all transactions in this country are carried out in cash. That's all transactions by value. There's clearly a very large overlap between people who operate in cash and the informal economy. It could not be $3 billion worth of informal economy if we didn't have a latent entrepreneurialism present in the country. How do you harness that? Today we've got a banking sector that that's not their job, by the way. And again, I'm not being judgmental on the banks. They're there to make profit. And their cost base is such that there are operations and entrepreneurs in the informal sector operating perhaps largely in cash that they're never going to make money on. Now, specialists who do not have the same cost profile as banks probably can come in and make money. And they can offer products that people want. It might be, Senator Holder spoke earlier, but it might be specialists who come in who have a different way of measuring corporate risk specifically for SMEs and micro SMEs included. It might be microfinance. You already know that we have effectively payday lenders in the country who are not yet regulated, by the way. It might be specialists who come in who submit to oversight either through the FSC or the central bank, and they offer their services, and so on and so forth. You look across the globe, there are many examples of firms who use technology to deliver micro pensions, micro insurance, all sorts of products that just don't exist here today. And the banking setup as it currently stands cannot deliver to those people. Now, it is the case, in my view, that those firms can be attracted, that we have the ability to do it by being imaginative and proactive. I think it would be a shame if we didn't do our best actually to tackle the problem and to look at it slightly differently than the way we do at the moment. You know, there are two broad canons that have to be respected when it comes to banking, central banking regulation, or regulation by the central bank of commercial banks. That is, you want to guarantee stability in your system, but at the same time you want to protect consumers and you want to promote consumer rights. Now, unfortunately, sometimes those two objectives are in opposition to one another. One thing that we've excelled at, certainly since 1972, is stability in the banking sector. In some ways it's not surprising because an oligopoly is inherently stable. They do not want to change. They are happy with the status quo. It's entrenched. They're happy with that. But the price of that, I would say, can be measured in consumer protection. How much is paid for access to banking services? What are some of the fees that are there? Now, that's the price you pay. Have we got the balance right? I don't believe that we do, and I think the regulator should use its opportunity under this bill to change matters. So I'd make a couple of concluding remarks. You know, when the original Central Banking Act was passed in 1972, it really was at the end of, in retrospect, a remarkable period of dislocation. You know, independence was coming across the region. There was great fragmentation. This country had left the Eastern Caribbean Currency Board arrangement. There was a devaluation of sterling, which was very important to this region at that time because many of the banks and governments held a lot of their balances in sterling. Sterling was devalued by 14%. And of course, in 1971, Bretton Woods broke down. The dollar came off the gold standard. That act was brought in. Everybody recognized, I think, at the time that a new page, a new era had dawned. And as far as, you know, it was pretty much a cookie-cutter act at the time. It was drafted mainly by Bank of England and I think some IMF officials. But it's changed and evolved over time. Now today, I don't think anybody, I mean, I actually believe I heard earlier in the day that the government is hiding the gravity of what's going on in this country. I think that's almost the last thing you could say that this government is doing. Everybody knows we face a huge dislocation related to COVID and the pandemic, and also that we started from a very disadvantageous fiscal position in terms of the debt and the precarious value of the currency that debt was sitting on. This act, like the one in 1972, recognizes that times have changed, that we need new tools to handle some of the challenges before us, and part of that is depoliticizing the work of the central bank. This is a very, very good piece of legislation in my view. I think we should be proud of it. I support it wholeheartedly, and I thank you for your indulgence. I'm obliged, sir.
Thank you, Senator Adams. Senator Franklin.
Mr. President, I had no intention of speaking on this bill because what I know about central banking can hold in this bottle. Very little. But I've seen a few things that trouble me. And when I hear Senator Greenwich speak, and now subsequently Senator Adams, and I heard the minister, because I listen to him too. Sometimes I say regrettably, but I didn't know what he was talking about. Unless he's reading from a different act than the one that sent me. The one I'm reading from is one that says correct copy dated 2020 11/19. I hope this is the one that we're all coming from. Because they spoke about the Governor General being involved in the appointment and disappointment of the governor of the central bank. When I first heard it, the first thing that came to my mind is to say that he said that if you're going to get rid of the Governor General, my words not his, I mean the Governor of the Central Bank, that you have to have some system where the Governor General is involved, and she would have to approve the dismissal. But that sounds strange to me and everything that I know as a practicing industrial relations person. There's one principle that we go by. He who appoints can also disappoint. And the Governor General is not involved in the appointment. So she shouldn't be, or they say head of state, so I don't know what they're doing, should not be involved in the dismissal. I well remember former governor of the Central Bank saying that the governor is a creature of the Minister of Finance. This bill, with all the talk that we've been hearing, has let that remain. Let me give you the example I'm talking about. And we'll have to pull it up. Section 17 says that the board, with the approval of the minister, can appoint a governor of the central bank. I didn't see anything there where it says the Governor General does anything about that. But then, Section 25 is the one that captured me. Section 25. Either I don't understand it, and that's entirely possible, or what the government is saying that it's doing, they have not captured in the legislation. Section 25. So let me turn in pages. Section 25 is headed disqualification and removal. It says no person shall be appointed as or remain a deputy governor or a director. And I suppose here it means that the governor of the central bank is also a director. So, but I think they should have made it clear. Where, and it says A, B, C, D, E, F. I go down to F, it says the minister, on the recommendation of the board, finds that he, 1, is unfit or otherwise incapable of carrying his duties, is guilty of serious misconduct in relation to his duties, or approved policies of the board, or 3, contravenes Section 27.1, 27.3, or 27.4. But here's the clincher. Subsection 2 says, notwithstanding paragraph F, the one I just read, of subsection 1, no person shall remain a governor where the Governor General, on the recommendation of the minister, finds that he is unfit or otherwise incapable of carrying his duties, is guilty of serious misconduct in relation to his duties, or approved policy of the board, has contravened sections 27.1 to 3, and then it goes and says, has acted contrary to objectives and functions of the bank settled in section 6 of this act. Where is the procedure for the Governor General to deal with this matter? Because as far as I know, the Constitution of Barbados, in the Constitution of Barbados, the Governor General acts on the advice of their minister. So if you are giving the Governor General a role where the Governor General now has to hear cases and determine the evidence, because whether if you hear the case either by paper or by the person coming before the Governor General, I don't know. You're saying that the Governor General, it says, shall remain a governor where the Governor General, on the recommendation of the minister, finds that he's there. Now, the Constitution, I went looking for it a little while ago, and section 32 says that the Governor General carry functions on the advice of the cabinet or minister, acting under the general authority of the cabinet in exercise of his functions, and it says other than the few. But this is not one of the exceptions. So is the Governor General now going to breach the Constitution, or is this act breaching the Constitution in relation to the functions of the Governor General? Because the Governor General doesn't appoint, so she doesn't disappoint. Even public officers. If you are appointed under section 94 of the Constitution, where you become a public officer, the commission, the service commission that deals with them, does not appoint you. They make a recommendation to the Governor General, and the Governor General can't say no. Then, if you are being dismissed, the same commission makes a recommendation to the same person that appointed you, the Governor General. The Governor General is not involved in this appointment and can't be involved in the dismissal without more. And there's nothing more to guide the Governor General in this legislation. And I didn't want to believe that they messed up that, but you know, this administration has a tendency for doing that, putting things in place and then not putting any regulations to govern them, just like the last amendment to the Seventh Payment Act, no regulations whatsoever. Is this another one of those things? So, section 25.2, I made a note, it says. So I want to find out what section 25.2 means. I wrote a note, it says, what does this mean? Because it does not mean anything to me. It might mean something to other people, or they might have some intention of saying something, but what they have captured here in the legislation, sir, is not what I hear the minister say when I listen to him on the radio. So we have to resolve this. What is the Governor General's role in this? It seems to me that you are putting some words together to give the impression, whether that is intended or not, to give some semblance of security for the Governor of the Central Bank. But as far as I can see here, all you have to do to get rid of the governor is for the minister to tell the Governor General, he's gone, according to what you have written here. The other aspect that troubles me is the Governor General should be appointed, the Governor of the Central Bank should be appointed for 6 years, and then it can be renewed. I never like it, whether it's old or new or whatever, I don't like it at all. I can tell you why. The Governor of the Central Bank might not be in agreement with the minister coming up to his 6 years. But then quickly thereafter, you realize, that my 6 years coming up. So let me better agree with this man because I want to get reappointed. I believe that the governor should have a retirement date, a retirement age. And if you look at in other jurisdictions like the United States, the federal judges, they're appointed for life. So you can't tell them, I can get rid of you. Because yes, you can get rid of them, but it got to be for misconduct. You can't get rid of them because you want them out. This legislation here does not give the kind of security that the government is touting, or I am misreading. And I said, well, I'm not the brightest, so I could be misreading, but it does not ring true to me. He says that he should be removed only in accordance with Section 25. But Section 25 gives the government a way out. Even if you intended something good, some drafter or somebody with keeping the status quo put this thing back in here. Now, that's enough about the industrial relations aspect of the governor of the central bank and his thing. And since I'm on my feet, because what I would have said wouldn't have taken much, so I decided, well, I'm not going to say anything. But no, since I'm at it, central bank and the regulation of banks. The banks in Barbados have been taking this country for a ride with the blessings of the government, because the last administration, people tell me we should be cursing the last administration because they're in the government. No, but no, that's not fair. The last administration decide they're going to let the central bank relax or get rid of the minimum interest rate. I know the minimum the interest rate at banks are something like 0.0 something %. And you say, this is a joke. When they're still lending you money at 12%. These banks are robbing you. You know, one thing people go in banks and stick them up. No, it's reverse. The banks are robbing you. It's reverse. It is robbery. Something has to happen. I remember years ago there was a Rates of Interest Act where where interest rates were regulated. I remember it was one case where I think it was trade confirmers who put a person in court for some money. And the court said, you can't recover because your rate was higher than the maximum interest rate allowed. We need something like that in Barbados. We need it again. Because if you leave the banks to regulate their own business, they're going to take advantage of the customers every time, and they're doing it every day. It is like the employers. If you don't give a minimum wage or say that you can't pay people less than this, they can pay as little as possible. So the banks say the same thing. Greed. Supreme greed. So the central bank and the government has to hold these banks into some sort of fair basis for doing business in this country. Or Colombo business, I see they have done everything possible, and they fought with the government, the banks, to ensure that credit unions don't survive. Credit unions to this day can't issue checks to their members, even though in the cooperative society legislation it says if the registrar approves, right now it will mean the FSC, if they approve, you can issue checks. But even if the FSC approves, you still have to get the clearance from the central bank because you've got to get involved in some, what do you call it? I don't know the name of the thing, but you have to you have to be on that clearinghouse in order to write checks issued by the credit unions. Credit unions lend people money to travel overseas. They have to go to the banks and take that money that you lend them and buy foreign exchange. Why couldn't they allow, the central bank allow the credit unions to have foreign exchange dealings, to be allowed to be dealing in foreign exchange? I see the credit unions have come up with a novel idea and breaching the credit union principles and the law, as far as I'm concerned, by having entities owned by the credit unions who are banks, other little banks or other little financial institutions, which they do the things that the credit unions can't do as a ruse. For instance, some credit unions have established these little companies to get around the Cooperative Societies Act. I don't think that should be done. But they're doing it nonetheless. But they're doing it out of necessity in some instances, and in some instances out of getting jobs with some of the friends. But those are things that need to be fixed. The people are always saying, oh, the creditors got a lot of money, and they won't invest. But the credit unions are only allowed to invest in certain things. You had to get permission at one stage to buy shares. I remember when I was secretary to a credit union, I wrote the then Minister of Finance and saying, look, the National Bank got things selling, but we want to buy some. But the legislation does not allow us to buy. Could you fix that legislation? I didn't get a reply. So we didn't get any. But then you hear people say, no, they had shares in the Republic Bank and you don't buy none. We couldn't buy them. The law was against you. But then again, the government needed foreign exchange and credit with the buying with local dollars. So that could have been the issue. But even if it means that central bank have to do some measure of control over credit unions should get their training wheels off by now. We have been in the business of financial transactions for too long that we still be learning. And you got to hold our hands, put regulations in place, make sure we follow them, but allow let the credit unions to function like the banks. There are going to be certain things that credit unions still won't be able to do because right now you can only service your members. So if you're not a member of a credit union, you should be able to walk in and get a loan. But whosoever will can walk into a bank and get a loan. So that would be the distinct difference. Some credit unions are governed by a bond. If you are not in a particular sector, you can't join this credit union. So those are our restrictions. But it shouldn't restrict us from doing what other institutions, other financial institutions can do. To what end? Who is it helping? You don't trust the poor black boys who run the credit unions? I don't trust a lot of them either myself, but that's besides the point. But I'm talking about institutional trust. You can't. It is not the individual that we're talking about. When the individual fall up, we will deal with them. But we need to get some measure of discipline in the financial sector, and you're not going to get it if the banks can do what they like, and we have to follow. Years ago, I think it's still in the Cooperative Societies Act. It hasn't changed. It says that the credit unions could not charge interest, which is give you interest your dividends, which is 2%, more than 2% higher than the savings rate. Well, they ain't got no savings rate now. But that was also to restrict credit unions, because when the credit unions could have given you more, again, they found a way to stop you from giving them more, to keep credit unions poor. But credit unions are resilient. People like Lynette, Senator Holder, she will tell you that we've been fighting these issues for years, and nobody, no government, has responded. We had an unprecedented number of credit unionists in the last administration. And you know what they did for credit unions? In that 10 years? Zilch. Probably a little less. But we need, sir, and we need it badly. Let the credit unions, if you're saying that the credit unions are not regulated by the central banks, let the credit unions have some measure of control. in areas that, or let them in the FSC collaborate, FSC Financial Services Commission, let them collaborate. But we will not be in a position where we are so dependent on these predator banks. I mean, not predator banks, we call them, commercial banks. I got the words mixed up. We should not have to rely on those banks. Totally. We have our own indigenous institutions, use them. So as I said, I wasn't going to intervene in this debate, but there are those two areas that trouble me, and I would prefer some answers. I want to have Section 25 clarified, and I'm begging that for the sake of the credit union movement and for the people who depend on them, to give us some, take off the reins, you know, or at least if you don't take them off, loosen them a little bit. I am much obliged to you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Franklin. Any further speakers? Senator McConney.
Mr. President, thank you. I really want to thank the honorable members of this House for their contribution to this debate at this point in time. I think one of the themes that I heard running from presentation to presentation, Mr. President, is a need for the leveling of the playing field for banks and other financial institutions in the financial landscape of Barbados. And certainly this is something that this government has committed that we will continue to work towards on a piece-by-piece basis. I would wish to make some basic responses, some general responses to some of the key concerns that were raised by some of our senators. I know Senator Drakes, I really want to thank her for acknowledging the need for recapitalization of the central bank and for being supportive of the fact that this government is moving forward in terms of putting a recapitalization plan together. She also raised some concerns. In fact, she asked what protection there is from a minister with little credibility in terms of discussions with the central bank, etc. And my understanding of what she said, Mr. President, would suggest that it could be interpreted by others as the fact that government is doing nothing to protect the people of Barbados from that kind of situation. I want to say that there's nothing further from the truth, because I would like to remind this honorable House, through you, sir, that the central bank has responsibility for monetary policy. The government has responsibility more so for macroeconomic policy. There is no conflict, there is no competition between the responsibilities and the roles of the two entities. And in fact, the central bank can certainly advise as there's provision so to do, but the government may choose or not to choose to take that advice on the macroeconomic issues, because of course there is a collaboration and a consultation, but not the rules and the responsibilities remain very clear. I want to say therefore, and if indeed Senator Drakes and others might believe that there needs to be some further protection, I want to remind them of the democratic process, where the people, through voting, is the ultimate answer to a minister that they believe lacks credibility and is unable to do the work that has to be done. Also, Mr. President, a question was raised again by Senator Drakes about the government's commitment to social protection, especially of those who would have lost money earning opportunities, whether through employment or other means due to the COVID. And I really am surprised that Senator Drakes would raise this matter, because it has been very clear what this government has continued to do. And with your permission, sir, I would wish to share some evidence with regards to how government has committed to the enhancement of social protection to ensure that those who have become unemployed because of COVID-19, that they don't fall through the cracks. So I want to give some evidence of that. if we look at the wage subsidy fund for micro and small business owners to reduce their payroll expense, that was something we put in place to help small and medium and micro enterprises, whereby up to $500 a month for up to 5 employees and micro and small enterprises was paid to help reduce the payroll impact on the employers. We look to and also to ensure that those workers with reduced income coming into the employers were still able to carry home significant payment. I look at, sir, we may look at the household survival program, the adopt a family program, up to the end of September of this year. 3,448 households had received disbursements of $600 consistently over a period of months, and I believe that the Minister of Finance has just asked that this benefit also be expanded. We can also appoint, Mr. President, sir, to the VAT loan fund. We can look at the 40% increase in welfare grants. We can look at the business cessation grants, which is administered by the NIS, where up to $3,000 is paid for those who had cessation of business, were impacted by the cessation of business, and I am told that close to 2,000 persons have, businesses that have benefited from the business cessation program have been in place. Now, sir, I could go on and on, but I think that we want to move towards the end, but I just thought that it was important, even in simply pointing out these few, and there are several others that I could also have pointed out, that indeed we would not want the public to be misled, or this honorable house to be misled, that indeed the social protections, the effort to give social protection was not there in a significant way. I want also to speak to Senator Holder and really thank Senator Holder for bringing the case for the credit unions to the table as part of this debate, looking at what the growth in loans and savings and other facilities to help enhance service of the credit unions to their membership, what has happened with regards to that. And I also note her call for there being a need for deposit insurance and the need for credit unions also to be engaged in the transactions related to foreign exchange at a very different level, similar to the call that was also made. Senator Greenidge spoke to Section 17.2 and the appointment and the removal of the governor. And he spoke of the fact significantly that the governor of the central bank and other senior officers significantly need to be appointed on the basis of their professionalism and their expertise, and that the politicization of governors of the central bank need not happen at this time. And in fact, he's pointed to ways in which this particular bill will seek to ensure that we move swiftly in that direction. I wish also to thank Althea Wiggins for the point that, Senator Althea Wiggins, for the point that she made towards the disenfranchisement of ordinary people who are seeking to access funds in this country. While it wasn't directly related to this bill, it was certainly tangential to some of what we were discussing. She also spoke of regulators and financial institutions alike having responsibility for public education. And Senator Adams certainly highlighted, he took us on a journey through from the original development of the Central Bank Act to this present time, and he highlighted the significance of this bill indeed, seeking to make the point that the emphasis on independence, accountability, and compliance was significant at this time in terms of moving us towards better governance and better administration of our affairs at a monetary level, and certainly through the central bank. And he also talked about perhaps some of the unintentional benefits where we could see the opening up of access to finance in imaginative ways. Senator Franklin, want to thank you also for your contribution. And you know, as usual, Senator Franklin is always entertaining. All I can say is that all acts are subject to interpretation. And we know that from time to time, sir, your interpretation will not align with those persons who are so trained to interpret the laws of Barbados. That said, sir, I wish to thank you very much for the contribution that you have made. And sir, it is with great gratitude for the level of debate that we have had on this subject that and on this bill, that I beg to move that this bill be now read a second time.
Thank you, Senator McConney. The question is that this bill be read a second time. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
I seem anxious to leave my post. The question is that he do not leave the chair and the Honorable Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think they're just as happy as I am. The ayes have it.
The Senate is now in committee. Judging parts.
Mr. President, you're taking parts?
Judging parts.
Have you permission to take in parts?
Permission granted to take the bill in parts.
Part 1, clauses 1 and 2.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Part 1, Clauses 1 to 2 stand part.
The question is that Part 1, clauses 1 to 2 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 3 to 6.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 2, Clauses 3 to 6 stand part.
The question is that Part 2, clauses 3 to 6 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 7 to 10.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 3, Clauses 7 to 10 stand part.
The question is that Part 3, clauses 7 to 10 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 4, clauses 11 to 32.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 4, Clauses 11 to 24, to 32, stand part.
The question is that Part 4, clauses 11 to 32 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 33 to 39.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 4, Clauses 33 to 30, Part 5, Clauses 33 to 39 stand part.
The question is that Part 5, clauses 33 to 39 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 6, clause 40.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 6, Clause 40 stand part.
The question is that Part 6, Clause 40 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 7, clauses 41 to 43.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 7, Clauses 41 to 43 stand part.
The question is that Part 7, clauses 41 to 43 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 8, clauses 44 to 55.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 8, clauses 44 to 55 stand part.
The question is that Part 8, clauses 44 to 55 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 9, clauses 56 to 63.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 9, clauses 56 to 63 stand part.
The question is that Part 9, clauses 56 to 63 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 10, clauses 64 to 68.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 10, clauses 64 to 68 stand part.
The question is that Part 10, clauses 64 to 68 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 11, clauses 69 to 79.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 11, clauses 69 to 79 stand part.
The question is that Part 11, clauses 69 to 79 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Deputy President has reported the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that this bill be now read a third time. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Central Bank of Barbados Act 2020.
The question is that this bill be now passed and so cited. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The bill is so passed and so cited.
Order number 2, in the name of the Honourable Leader of the Senate, to move the passing of a resolution to approve in accordance with Section 5 of the Land Acquisition Act, Chapter 228, the compulsory acquisition by the Crown of parcels of land situated at Gemswick in the parcel of St. Philip in this island, owned by Balmoral Investments Limited and leased to Grandy Adams International Airport, Inc., for the public purpose, namely enhancing public safety and national security.
Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I rise to move the passage of this resolution through the Senate under the provisions of the Land Acquisition Act, Cap 228. Mr. President, there are approximately 2 parcels of land that are being compulsorily acquired from Balmoral Investments. They total approximately 18.77 hectares. They are being acquired for the purpose of, in the first instance, ensuring public safety. This is an area that we know anecdotally as the Rock Hall area, where there has been for some time an illegal settlement which has continued to grow over many years. The land is the property, as mentioned before, of Balmoral Investments. There are two very specific challenges. One, of course, the fact that the area where the settlement has grown is a landfill, and it is a potential public disaster. And in addition to that, the Grant Lee Adams International Airport, to which the land abuts, has identified on more than one occasion challenges being raised by air traffic control, as reported by pilots flying into Grant Lee Adams International Airport, challenges with the navigation system as a result of the illegal construction in the area immediately prior to the runway. Mr. President, the continued development in this area has proven problematic. It is a matter of public interest and public knowledge, as have been the efforts under this administration, lest anyone say that they have not heard what is being done by the administration to support social welfare and to support social services. There has been an extensive discussion for the provision of alternate identification of relocation for the persons who currently reside at the Rock Hall settlement, for those persons to be enabled to have access to support, even though we acknowledge that the wrong thing was done and that no permission was given from the requisite agency. But this is who the government of Barbados is under this administration. We ensure that we provide all the services for a society that is in need, even in instances where it is not ideal, and even in instances where we are not supportive of what has been done in the first instance in terms of wrongdoing. Therefore, Mr. President, as a result of the health issues being faced by the persons potentially in this area and the security risks that it presents to the Grant Lee Adams International, I beg to move that this resolution for the compulsory acquisition of these two parcels of land totaling 18.777 hectares do now pass.
Senator Franklin. Thank you, Senator. Senator Franklin.
Thank you, sir. I won't be long. I'm just having a little difficulty understanding what's happening here. My surgeons have taken me to these areas, and I know the location well. And I understand the issue with the airport, because pilots have complained and the air traffic controllers have complained because those galvanized sheets that make up those houses, the roofs of those houses, throw off the radar. So there should have been no building in the first place. And what they have to do is to somehow reprogram the radar not to see those houses or those roofs. And when they do that, the radar is less effective. But we have another issue, sir, is that people have gone and built on a landfill. That's the first thing. They should not have been allowed there in the first place. But politics is I think these people vote. So, again, it didn't happen under this administration. But, you want those people, so you didn't trouble them, because that was one of the seats that could go either way. So, you put air travel at risk for the sake of votes. And you allowed people to build, and some of them are substantial homes. I know of one person who already has a house, and he said everybody was building down there, so you can go and build one too. And he rents it out to some foreign nationals. So all of the people down there are not necessarily people who cannot find a spot and decide they're going to go down there because they're going to live somewhere. There are fellows who saw an investment opportunity that will cost them precious little because the land was free, and they jumped on it. Unpatriotic. That's what we call them. Sir, but it is a landfill. Government should have said to these people, no, you can't build there. And if you build there, either you're going to relocate them, or you're going to pull down the place and catch it, dump like everybody else. But they do that to other people when they build houses in areas where they're not allowed to build. The marshals come after a while, dismantle the house, and hopefully you can scramble some of your stuff because it heading to the landfill. That's what they do. That's what the laws provide for in Barbados. But these were a big settlement now, so you can't take down these things in the landfill because then people vote. So they put air traffic in a bind. They compromise our radar. We have to stop this political nonsense and do what is best for this country, not necessarily what is best for the party in power at the time. Because I can assure you, when they were putting up their houses and the Democrat, their party was in power, and there were bees building there, they would have moved them. So don't let me get cross purposes, but it is a landfill. So why would the government now say to people, oh, you can't build here, and you have to move, or we're going to move you, and then buy a landfill? I don't understand it. Are you just giving Balmoral Investments some money? Because they can't develop it, you can't put a hotel on it, you can't put houses on it, you can't do anything with it. It is basically a landfill, it's robbed land, so why is the government buying a landfill? I could find some swamp land and sell them too. But it is a landfill, so why is government taking resources that we don't have much of and buying a landfill? Who is Balmoral Investments, and why are we treating these people so favorably? If I had a piece of gully land that nobody, the few walks on and things, they're coming and back from me. So why are they buying a landfill? Put up signs and say you can't build here, and if necessary, but if necessary, bulldoze whatever's on it. But don't allow other people, when you move these, to come on it. But that doesn't mean you got to buy the land. Because what are you going to do with it? And it is enhancing national security, because the perimeter of the airport, the perimeter fence of the airport, they're not going to compromise. You just will be extending the perimeter fence of the airport and giving, of course, now a few fellows get more jobs to clean the grass, but grow up on it, but that's all. It's nothing to do with national security. It has everything to do with the fact that somebody named Balmoral Investments, who might got friends in the right place or right places, can sell their landfill to the government.
Mr. President, I rise on a point of order.
Oh, please, I want you to explain.
Mr. President, I think that Senator Franklin is misleading the House. He has himself indicated that it was a national security challenge. He has himself indicated that it has always been a national security challenge. Now he's attempting to cast aspersions on the government of the day by introducing spurious allegations of wrongdoing on a basis that he himself has acknowledged is a national requirement for the purposes of national security. Mr. Senator Franklin, you are misleading the House, and you know it.
You see what I like her, sir? She could defend anything. I like that, But it still is not going to divert me from my point that the national security issue was the houses with these tin roofs or galvanized roofs that was thrown off the radar. The national security issue meant move them. They had to move. This must move. But that doesn't mean you got to buy the landfill that they're on. That's the point I'm making, It is a national security issue when you got planes coming in and the radar is compromised because the radar can't pick up things inside there because you program that area out of the radars, the function of the radar. Yes, you want a better and a more efficient radar because each amendment you make to the radar system, it loses some of its effectiveness. They already have challenges over the other side of the road in Sharnox, where people who live out there cannot build houses with those types of rules. But there are some that had those rules before you made these regulations. And the regulations are good in order. I have no problem with it. My point, sir, is that it is a landfill that should not have been occupied with anybody. God knows what is under that landfill that can come up and give me cancer or whatever else coming up out the ground. The fumes coming up from down there, because anything went into that landfill, and it will eventually come to the surface, because I don't think it was capped and sealed and made good. And even then, you should have some sort of pipes that will bring some of the gases out and do what they have to do with it. So these people are on the landfill, they shouldn't have been there. They should have been stopped when the first house went. But for political reasons, They allow them to stay. And now that they have stayed and they have become a large community, you want to pay them to leave. I want somebody to pay for a piece of land for me to put a house on too, you know. I got grandchildren. You know, so why don't you pay me for a piece of land? No, and a lot of these people are non-nationals. I'm not saying you treat non-nationals badly, mind you, because my wife was a non-national, you know. She took her first breath in St. Lucia. So she's a non-national for all intents and purposes. She subsequently acquired citizenship. She's not here legally. Oh, no, she's made 2. Courting me in the first place. But so I don't have difficulty with non-nationals because I have Guyanese children too. So yes, I sir, with all humility, sir, I'm a CARICOM man.
Clearly.
You know, so I preach, I practice what I preach.
In large measure.
You know? But so I don't want you to mistreat them. But I'm saying, but why allow them there in the first place? And some of them are there illegally in Barbados. So now you are going to take some illegal immigrants and take care of them, and we have locals who want help that can't get a spot. You have people, local people in Barbados that wanted a spot, can't get one. But you're going to find spots for these people. I am not saying to deport them, I'm not saying anything, but if they come at their own risk, and then you go treat them better than you treat Bajans. Bajans want spots. I know people who go to National Housing on a regular basis trying to get even a little place to put a 2x3 on, can't get it. But these going to get priority. That's the problem I have, you know. No, don't get me wrong. I am still going to be a CARICOM man one of them, but you know, not almost former president of the United States, say America first. I'm going to say Barbados first for Bajans too. Sir, I do not understand the rationale of buying a landfill that you can do nothing with. That is all I'm saying. I would like to find out. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Senator Franklin. Senator Greenwich.
Not at all. Not at all. Mr. President, I do not believe that since 24th of May 2018 that a single house was built on this particular site. I'm a St. Philip man, I passed there, I know there. I don't think so, that since 24th of May 20. But once again, it falls to this administration to repair the damage. Not do the damage, to repair the damage and to undo it. And it is now our turn once again, sir, to deal with this fiasco which really has got out of hand. I'll be the first to admit, sir, that previous administrations, previous BLP administration, previous DLP administration, sir, they have allowed this matter to go unchecked. And they actually, sir, turned a blind eye to what was going on. And I believe too, sir, that we as a government, as people always say, the Mayor Motley administration will be judged by the way we deal with it. Sir, in the life of every administration, that administration is going to be called upon to make a decision which I myself call a high hurdle decision. You can't avoid it. It is going to happen. It may very well be, sir, that you're called upon to decide in whose constituency you are going to place a landfill. You may be called upon to cut public servants' salaries by 8% or whatever. You may be called upon to uproot a complete community. These high-hurdle decisions, these issues, will always confront a government. And there are issues that you cannot be ambivalent about. That is the point. You cannot be ambivalent about these issues. Perhaps, sir, the thinking of former administrations was that I will just let sleeping dogs lie. Why should I uproot them and cause a controversy? You see, Mr. President, silence was seen as a way to solve the problem. But indeed and in fact, sir, silence perhaps only made that problem worse. I remember passing there, sir, and I used to pass there when there were 5 houses on that site. Nobody said anything. Next time I passed, sir, I saw about 10 houses. Nobody said anything. I passed there, sir, there were 50 houses. Nobody still would say anything. I'm sure there are over 100 houses over there. And sir, if we do not do something about it now, sir, do you know, Mr. President, do you know what that number would be next year? Nobody was doing anything, sir. As you have heard, sir, there may very well be dangerous chemicals. There may very well be toxic fumes presently just lying there, sir, comfortably perhaps now, relaxing in this landfill. And sir, we know that these fumes can erupt at any time, and they can affect the lungs of those they come in contact with. They can be extremely deadly, sir. This site was initially a dump. It is a fact. And it is not healthy for anyone to reside there. Sometimes, Mr. President, we have to save people from themselves. The foundation, the very foundation that those houses are built on top of that dump, cannot be the best. You've heard from Senator Franklin that the houses, they are throwing off the radar, as he put it. The site is virtually in the flight path. It is in a dangerous location. Sometimes, sir, we have to save people from themselves. Most flights leaving the airport, they lift over Rock Hall. And sir, you know and I know that whether it be landing gears or whether it be lifting gears, they are not faultless. Things can happen. Things can happen. Why court the danger? It is best thing, let them go. Mr. President, silence on this particular matter is not an option. It is not an option. Put as bluntly as possible, Mr. President, we cannot allow these individuals to remain on that site. If we do not take this stance, we will be condoning the action of persons who are deliberately breaking the law. Doing nothing and saying nothing, Mr. President, will do more harm than good. It will send the wrong message that persons can break the law and then they can say, I want some sympathy, and then they can get away with it. Silence now, today, is not an option. And so, when this matter first surfaced, about a year ago, it was, I recall, on a call-in program, one person who actually said the same thing which Senator Franklin said here this afternoon. That person said they never paid a cent in rent. They never paid a cent in land tax. I have to pay land tax. Government should run a bulldozer through those houses. And sir, this will not be the approach of this government. This government cannot be that heartless as even to think about such an act. What I can say, and this may very well be my personal view, is that individuals should have to bear the expense of having their houses relocated. If you're going to take them from point A and put them to point B, they should bear that particular expense. Government has provided somewhere for them to go, and moving there should be their own responsibility. They cannot expect government to do every single thing for them. As I said, sir, I'm a St. Philip man, and some individuals who live on that site may not agree with what I'm saying. And I sympathize with them, yes. I sympathize with them for feeling this way about what I'm saying. They have spent a lot of money, perhaps where some of them are concerned, their entire life savings in constructing a place for them to live. The point is, sir, they disobeyed the law. I can empathize with them, as I said, with those who may have to walk away and leave their properties, especially the wall structures. But I will not be supporting, Mr. President, them in building on that site in the very first place. That was their cardinal sin. The cardinal sin. I think that is an expression which Senator Rogers has heard time and time again. I'm sure Senator Holder too has heard that. And as Senator Franklin said, I know it would put someone like a parliamentary representative in a bind, where you have to look your constituent in the face and say, yes, but you were wrong. You should go elsewhere. You should move from here to there. I know that. And I know how hard it must be on that person who is the parliamentary representative. I have no doubt it would. But sometimes you have to make a tough decision. You have to take a tough stance. And it would not be fair, Mr. President, to insist that those who built chattel houses at Rock Hall should be recited, while those who have wall structures should remain. You know, saying just because it's wall and you can't move it, we can't do better, you gotta stay. It wouldn't be fair to tell the ones with the chattel houses go and the ones with the wall remain. Quite frankly, Mr. President, if you have a wall structure on the property, I think, sir, that is your problem. You may have to walk away and leave it. That is a big risk that you took. It is a risk that you took upon yourself when you built that wall structure without permission. You took a risk and you fell into your own trap. And that's about as blunt as you can be. It is a price that you have to pay for disobeying the law. I believe, sir, that government is being extremely compassionate. And these individuals should be thankful that government is finding somewhere for them to go. That they will move together as a community. They do not have to spend a lifetime looking for somewhere to find a suitable house spot. I think this is a lifeline which is being thrown out to the squatters. The provision of land and somewhere to go, I think, is a humanitarian gesture by this administration. And so, I will close, Mr. President, by saying that there's nothing wrong with making a tough decision if that tough decision, Mr. President, is the right decision. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Greenidge. Senator Grant.
Thank you, Mr. President. This resolution before this chamber is a relatively simple one, providing the opportunity for the compulsory acquisition of the land as outlined by Senator Cummings. Of course, in the presentation of the opposition senator, Senator Franklin, he made reference to, and I think I wrote down what he said. He talked about, for political reasons, allowing persons to stay on the land. I think it is important to communicate, as has been said before, this is not a situation that started today, but it is a situation that is being dealt with today. The point is, and there can be no denying the fact that persons took the opportunity, not in conformity with the law, to go and build houses on this land. There's no doubt, sir, about the issues with respect to air traffic and the need to ensure that we eliminate any challenges to the air traffic control. So I think the resolution that is before us is one that is appropriate, it's proper, and it is really being undertaken for the right reasons. But maybe, sir, this discussion should allow us to focus on an aspect of law. I'm going to trespass briefly, sir, in the domain of law. Because when I heard Senator Franklin speaking, the first thing I did or remembered was an issue in Fort George Heights, I believe. I believe there were members of the Rastafarian community who were occupying land at Fort George. In fact, some people were living there for as long as 30 years. I believe, sir, that they would have been reported in the newspapers. What was said to be an offer coming from the I'm going to say legitimate owners, or in fact, don't let me say that. Let me say made by those who have title to the land. And the offer that was made, based on what appeared in the newspaper, was an amount of $1.3 million and an offer about 4 acres of land. And the families on the land said no. And what had occurred, and the attorneys can better guide me in this area, what had occurred, sir, was that the persons occupying the land had obtained certain rights, sometimes referred to as squatters' rights. The attorneys may refer to that in a more legal concept of adverse possession. And the point that I'm making is that I have no doubt that there's the humanity element in dealing with this issue. But at the same time, we also have to be very aware that when persons go and build on land and there's no payment made, even if it is a peppercorn rate, even if you're paying a $50 a year or something, if there's no transfer of any money, for a period, I believe, under the law of Barbados, it is 10 years, I believe. But the attorneys will correct me if I'm wrong, that a person can claim adverse possession. And maybe, sir, it is time for us to take a look at that and maybe look at what would have happened in the United Kingdom, because there was a significant case in the United Kingdom where someone was able to claim a lot of land. And they then had to bring the Land Registration Act of 2002 to make it extremely difficult for squatters to claim rights of possession based on adverse possession. So the first point I want to make is that these persons, yes, would have gone on this land and would have done so illegally, but there are certain rights, I believe, that those persons would have acquired in law that complicates this matter as well. And the government has made a determination as to how they would deal with the matter, and we are here today to seek to ensure that we are able to facilitate the obtaining of the land. The question was raised as to what can be done in the area. I remember the area. Senator Greenidge, I'm not from St. Philip, but I have passed through St. Philip on numerous occasions on my way to the Lodge School, in case anybody thinks that I was passing through St. Philip for other reasons. And what happened, there was a bus, a school bus, that passed by the airport, and it passed through Gemswick, and I'm very aware that that area was a landfill. But in circumstances sometimes where people feel desperate, they take situations into their own hands, and we, though, have to ensure that we properly assess things and that we properly carry out whatever is required under the law. But I heard Senator Franklin speak to the fact that there's nothing possibly that could go there. But I do know that there has been some discussion, for example, about the possibility of having some kind of solar farm in that area. And, you know, and while that is not a policy or an agreed position. I'm only saying that that is a possibility of looking at something like a solar farm for that type of area to be able, of course, to generate electricity and to be able to provide for the Grantley Adams International Airport. Mr. President, I would not allow this opportunity to pass without making some brief reference to tourism and what is happening. Of course, sir, 2020 has been an extremely challenging year, one that is not, one that was not anticipated at all. I remember, sir, in January, being in this chamber and speaking to what we had certainly been anticipating as an extremely good year in tourism. And of course, with respect to tourism, airlift is extremely critical. And we are happy to know that there is airlift coming back out of our major source markets, not at the level, of course, that we would want the airlift to be at, but it is coming back. We are seeing flights coming out of the United States on American Airlines. We're seeing that is out of Miami, flights out of JFK on JetBlue. We are seeing there'll be flights coming out of Charlotte as well. We have seen the return of airlift coming out of the UK on both Virgin and British Airways. So that while, yes, the environment is still one that is extremely challenging, it is one where we are anticipating that 2021 will certainly be better than things have been in 2020. This year, there would have been significant reductions in occupancy. And I speak to this, sir, under this resolution only in the context that airlift is extremely important. The Grantley Adams International Airport is extremely important as we speak to the issue of tourism, as we speak to the issue of ensuring that there is improvement in the performance of this critical and important sector. And we continue to see, sir, some challenges with respect to occupancy, but the occupancy, in all seriousness, sir, is improving, and we are anticipating that in 2021 we will see higher levels of occupancy than we would have had previously. Mr. President, sir, you know, we have to ensure that as a people and as a government, we are able to take the correct measures to take the country forward, to deal with critical issues that come to the fore. And I believe it was Senator Greenwich who said that sometimes we have to take measures to protect persons from themselves. And it is important that we act, and we act in a timely manner when there are situations that come to our attention. Yes, there have been times when governments have acquired land and persons have even stayed on the land. I remember well, sir, somebody referenced, in fact, I believe, sir, you would have been very familiar with the parliamentary representative in the area at the time, lands close to the airport, where the houses were acquired, alternative arrangements were made, and persons stayed still in the houses. In fact, by the time government was looking to take possession, there were persons who were renting some of the houses that they had already been paid for. And the truth is that we have to ensure that we move and operate and function in a very timely manner when we are dealing with certain issues. And I think that it is very positive and good and appropriate that the government of Barbados is seeking with this resolution to have measures put in place to deal specifically with the challenge of the squatting and to take possession of that land and to have that land available to the Grantley Adams International Airport. Mr. President, sir, with those few words, I give my support to this resolution.
Thank you very much, Senator Grant. Senator Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I've listened to all the debate with regard to the politics of what will happen and why it was not done. But Mr. President, what it speaks to is the fact that government has not spent any time in regulating landfills. These landfills were there and people were allowed to build on them. And this problem, Mr. President, is not unique to Rock Hall. It's happened in Lower Estate, where there's a landfill, and the effluent from the landfill, both liquid and gaseous, is affecting the residents, and it will probably affect us all when it gets into the water table. And what this speaks to, Mr. President, is the need for government not only to fix the problems that exist, but to properly regulate landfills when they are finished their lifespan. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Maynard. Senator Reverend Dr. Rogers.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just rise to join the discussion for a brief moment because some questions came to mind as I heard the presentations being made. And I believe that there's some deeper issues we need to consider here in Barbados when we talk on matters such as this. I do empathize with the people at Rock Hall. I can imagine what it is like having nowhere and not knowing where you can, and you do things that you ought not do. But I also need to sympathize with them in the fact that I believe that the government is doing the right thing here in asking them to move. For one, we've heard it is a health hazard and a national security hazard. But one of the questions I wish to raise is what penalties are being placed on the owners of this land who have clearly not properly maintained their property by allowing people to squat, by allowing these kinds of activities to take place? It's just a question, and it is a question of national interest because it also has to do with not only these large tranches of land and this kind of activity taking place, but also the ordinary person who refuses to maintain his or her property and refuses to care his or her property, not much to the national detriment. And so I just wanted to raise that question. But then there's a deeper question about the communication between agencies of government, because how did these people acquire the services that they have if they have no ownership of the property? How did they get water and electricity and all those kinds of things if they're not in possession of the property? How did they get town planning? Or did they have town planning to build? I'm just raising these questions, you see, because these are matters that I think we need to pay close attention to when it comes to issues such as this, because clearly it means that these agencies are not speaking to each other. And illegal activity is being added to illegal activity, and these agencies are complicit in it. And so I just want us to, as we discuss this broader matter, to bear this in mind and pay attention to it at the national level, not only when it comes to issues such as this, but what is taking place around the country every day. And how can people build something and get amenities without town planning permission and without ownership of the property. And these are things that I think we need to consider. So I just wanted to raise these matters in this particular instance. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Rogers. Senator Cummins.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise to welcome the comments which have been made by the colleagues in the Senate on the bill and to attempt to respond to some of the queries which have been made by the colleagues. So Senator Franklin, obviously, I'm not sure where to begin. It is national security, but never mind, it's not national security. That's not a position that I can respond to, Mr. President. Senator Maynard made the point about the question of regulation of landfills, and it is a fair point. It is something to be discussed. Senator Rogers, you raised about the questions relating to permissions. I think, Mr. President, I would wish to make reference to the social impact report, which was done on the Rock Hall project, on the Rock Hall settlement, the legal settlement in Rock Hall. There is a report on the social survey which identified that there were approximately 300 properties which were there. The first survey, which was done on the area, was done in 2001, followed by a second one in 2008, and then the third survey, which was undertaken by this administration in 2019. And under those conditions, they were found that over the time, we moved from one number initially of 82 up to 100 by 2007, and by 2019, when the study was completed, there were a total of 300 properties on the site. The majority of them were not in great condition. Some of them had mixed access to public utilities, electricity, as well as water. There were in various stages. None of them had town and country planning permission, in answer to your question, and the determination was made that not only were they a public nuisance, a public health hazard, and a national security risk in terms of the Grantley Island International Airport, but the recommendation was made by the Ministry of Housing and Lands that all of the properties needed to be removed from what was deemed an illegal settlement. There was also a social assessment done of the householders who lived in the area in 2019 by this administration, which made a determination which will attempt to respond to some of the queries which were raised, I believe, by Senator Franklin with regard to capacity. Yes, there are different types of houses. There are some are shacks, there are some that are concrete structures and so on, and based on the social assessment of the residents and not of the structures, the government then was able to make a determination as to who would have to take responsibility and who would be eligible for different levels of support and who would not be eligible on the basis of what was done there. And so I hope that those explanations and the social assessment, which is captured in the report done at September 19, 2019 by this administration, will answer some of the questions which were raised. With this explanation and with this additional information, Mr. President, I do now move that this resolution do now pass.
Thank you very much. The question is that this resolution do now pass. Those honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. Resolution is accordingly passed.
Order number 1, sir. In the name of the Honourable Leader of the Senate, to move the passing of the resolution to approve in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Chapter 225, the lease to the Maria Holder Memorial Trust of certain parcels of land, the properties of the Crown, are more particularly described in the first and second schedules to this resolution, on the terms and conditions set out in the third schedule to this resolution, for the purpose of the construction of nursery schools.
Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I rise to move the passage of a resolution for the vesting of lands onto the Maria Holder Trust under the Crown, under the Vesting and Disposal Act, Cap 225. These are lands located at Sears Court in Christchurch, Holders Hill, and Durance Village in St. James. Mr. President, by Memorandum of Understanding dated April 10th, 2012, the government of Barbados entered into a lease arrangement with the Maria Holder Trust for the construction of 6 nursery school locations at Holders Hill, Deacons, Sears Court, Gall Hill, Oldbury, and at Government Hill. Construction has been completed at several of these locations, and in this particular instance, at Sears Court, Holders Hill, and Durance Village, construction is well underway and or has been completed, and the proposed length of the lease is approximately 30 years. The expectation, Mr. President, is that there will be the ability in these various locations, these 6 locations in this occasion on this particular resolution, Sears Court, Holders Hill, and Durance Village, that these nursery schools will allow the communities that are in these areas, the residents who live in these areas, many of them single parents who are in need of primary services for their children as parents go to work and their children need to be accommodated. You've seen, if you've driven around the country in particular, you, Mr. Deputy President, as a St. Michael, as a St. Philip man, and many of those who have spoken about St. Philip, you've seen the properties, for example, in St. Philip that are there. They're beautifully done and well-appointed properties that are befitting the nation's children, and we would wish on this occasion to allow the children of Sears Court, Holders Hill, and Durance Village to be enabled with the provision of nursery services. The first schedule of the bill refers, Mr. President, to the acquisition of 230.5 square meters of land at Sears Court. And in the second schedule of the bill, it refers to the land to be acquired at Holders Hill and Durance Village, accounting for approximately a total of 5,785.3 square meters. The third schedule of the bill, of the resolution, Mr. President, speaks to both to the terms and conditions of the lease, and they are outlined here, Mr. President, and it includes all of the arrangements for public knowledge. There is a further addendum, Mr. President, which allows us to speak specifically to the financing of the construction of the nursery schools, which will be included in the development, lease, and transfer of the nursery schools to the Crown at the end of the lease period. And with these words, Mr. President, I would wish to move the passage of this resolution.
Thank you, Senator Cummins. Any further speakers? Okay, the question is that this resolution do now pass. Those honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. Resolution is therefore passed. Okay.
Mr. President, this brings us to the end of government business for today, and I beg to move that the Senate do now adjourn until December 18th, 2020.
Question is that the Senate be adjourned until Friday, December 18th, 2020. Those honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those honourable senators against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. The Senate therefore stands duly adjourned.